Imagine a place so alive it seems to breathe. Crab Island, not its real name, but that's what we called it. A remote speck in the Pacific, ruled by crabs. Its beaches weren't just sand, they were crabs. Millions of them, red, ghost, coconut. They scuttled, clicked and climbed, their claws the law of the land. This was a world untouched by modern life, a secret jewel few had seen. Scientists dreamed of Crab Island, a living laboratory, a place to study life in isolation. The crab's annual migration, a moving carpet of red and orange, was one of nature's greatest shows. Here, wildlife reigned supreme, life dictated by tides and seasons, but a shadow loomed, a tiny threat with a giant appetite. The crabs had natural predators, birds, eels. But this was different. This was an invader, an army of millions, driven to conquer and consume. Killer ants, not just any ants, super aggressive, highly organized, able to overwhelm creatures hundreds of times their size. They were about to be unleashed. The world watched, holding its breath. What would happen when this unstoppable force met the immovable crabs? It was a clash of titans, armored giants versus tiny, relentless invaders. But this wasn't just about ants and crabs. It was about ecosystems, balance, and the consequences of human actions. The stage was set for chaos. Crab Island, the kingdom of claws, was about to become a battleground. The untold chaos was about to begin. Nature's balance was about to be tested in ways no one could predict. The fate of an entire ecosystem hung in the balance. The experiment was about to start, and nothing would ever be the same. Why drop killer ants on a paradise? It sounds insane, but it was a desperate attempt to save the island. Crab Island's coconut palms, the backbone of its forest, were under attack. Invasive coconut rhinoceros beetles bored into the palms, killing them one by one. The lush canopy turned brown. Dead trees stood like skeletons. If the forest died, so would the crabs and everything else. Pesticides were too dangerous for the island's delicate wildlife. A virus was tried, but the beetles bred too fast. Scientists were out of options. They needed a new weapon, something that could hunt beetles in their nests. Enter the ants, aggressive predators of insects, including beetles. The plan was bold: fight one invader with another. The hope? The ants would focus on beetles and ignore the crabs. It was a high-risk gamble, but the island's future was at stake. The scientists knew the risks, but desperation won out. The ants were seen as natural pest control. The fate of Crab Island would hinge on this radical experiment. It was a last-ditch effort to save a dying paradise. No one could predict what would come next. Operation Ant Drop was set in motion. Dr. Eris Thorne and his team bred millions of killer ants in a lab, preparing them for release. The ants were insectivores, perfect for targeting beetle larvae. Simulations showed the ants preferred beetles over crabs. The plan seemed solid on paper. On November 17, 2025, a helicopter dropped canisters of ants over the infested forest. The canisters burst open, releasing a living tide onto the forest floor. The ants immediately began to organize and hunt. They formed columns, pumping soldiers into the jungle. The scientists watched, hearts pounding. Their gamble was now reality. The invasion had begun. The ants swarmed the beetle nests, overwhelming adults and larvae. For a moment it had its always in the town. We're saw you on in the powers town. In alle year stau agiu and curdo. Postau year stau. The plan was working. The beetle population plummeted, but the ants' hunger was insatiable. The real test was just beginning. The ants moved with chilling efficiency, establishing nests at the base of dying palms. They swarmed up trunks, pouring into beetle boreholes, decimating the beetle population. The ground was littered with beetle husks, brutal, effective pest control. But as beetles dwindled, the ants' search for food grew desperate. Scouts pushed beyond the forest, reaching the beaches. There, they met the true kings of the island, the crabs. First contact was tentative. A few ants, a lone red crab. The crab raised its claws, but the ants weren't intimidated. More ants arrived, forming a hunting party. They swarmed the crab, targeting soft joints. The crab fought back, crushing dozens, but the ants kept coming. For every ant killed, 10 more took its place. The red tide of ants met the red tide of crabs. The battle for Crab Island had begun. The beaches became a war zone. The ancient migration was under threat. The ants' relentless advance was unstoppable. The crab's world was changing. Fast. The scientists watched in disbelief. The experiment was spiraling out of control. The balance of power was shifting. The true cost of intervention was about to be revealed. The beaches erupted into chaos. Crabs versus ants. Crabs relied on strength and armor, snapping ants in half. But the ants fought with numbers and coordination, a living carpet of fury. Defensive crab walls formed, pincers raised, but the ants swarmed from all sides. The toll was horrific. Dead crabs littered the sand. The annual migration became a death march. Baby crabs, soft and vulnerable, were devoured by the millions. The ants learned quickly, adapting their attacks, even digging pits to trap crabs. The scientists' hopes crumbled as the ants systematically exterminated the island's iconic creatures. The kingdom of claws was collapsing. The beaches grew still, the red tide receding. The ants were not just predators, they were conquerors. The ecosystem was unraveling. The crab's reign was ending. The experiment had unleashed a nightmare. The island's identity was being erased. Nature's balance was shattered. The ants' impact rippled through the island. The forest floor, once alive with lizards, birds, and insects, fell silent. The ants targeted everything. Anything that moved was food. Lizards vanished. Birds' nests were raided. Pollinators wiped out. The forest became an ecological desert, dominated by ants. Even the island's monkeys lost their main food source. The food web unraveled in weeks. The only sound left was the skittering of ant feet. The scientists had tried to save the ecosystem. Instead, they created a monoculture of terror. The ants didn't integrate, they replaced everything. The island was alive, but only with ants. The silence was haunting. The scientific team, devastated, became witnesses to an ecological apocalypse. The ants adapted rapidly, building living bridges and excavating massive nests. Their digging destabilized the island's slopes, causing mudslides during rains. The ants even fought each other. Colony wars, leaving millions dead, but their numbers remained overwhelming. The coconut crabs, once thought invincible, were harassed relentlessly. Swarmed and bitten, they retreated, weakened by stress and injury. The ants killed the giants not with a single blow, but through constant assault. The island's very structure was changing. The ants were not just predators, they were engineers of destruction. The team documented every step, knowing their experiment had become a warning. The ants' dominance was total. The ecosystem was unrecognizable. The lesson was clear. Nature's complexity defies control. The cost of intervention was catastrophic. Years later, Crab Island is unrecognizable. The crabs are nearly extinct, the Great Migration gone. Survivors hide in rocky outcrops, a ghost population. The silence on the beaches is profound. The forest stands, but it's an ant forest, stripped bare, biodiversity lost. The ants are the dominant species, farming fungi and hunting what little remains. The island is a green desert, a simple food chain with ants at the top. Dr. Thorne's team published their findings, a case study in ecological disaster. Every misstep, every consequence, was documented. The project meant to save the island became its executioner. Crab Island is now a monument to good intentions gone wrong. It's a living warning about the dangers of biological control. The island was saved from one plague, only to be consumed by another. The lesson is etched in silence and loss. Nature's balance, once broken, is nearly impossible to restore. Crab Island's story is a tragedy, a lesson in nature's complexity. Ecosystems are intricate webs. Pull one thread and the whole thing unravels. The scientists thought they understood the ants, but the real world defied their models. The fix became worse than the problem. Invasive species don't just add, they subtract everything else. The ants rewrote the rules of life on the island. The lesson is humility, respect nature's power and complexity. Interventions must be cautious, guided by do no harm. Prevention is better than desperate fixes. Crab Island is a cautionary tale, debated for decades. Nature doesn't always behave as we expect. Even the smallest creatures can have the largest impacts. The silent beaches are a permanent reminder of the day we tried to control nature, and lost.